Connie. Welcome to One Open Vortex. I'd like to start off by thanking you, the viewers, for tuning in, and my new subscribers for your support. Thank you for liking and sharing. And, again, remember, I welcome your comments and any questions you may have. So I'm going to jump right in. Today we're going to be talking about listening to your higher self. And as I discussed in my last video, the higher self at this point, due to the fact that we're so separated and unaware and far removed from it, at this point comes through as that voice that we have, or a gut feeling about something, which when you feel a gut feeling, it's your entire body responding to the messages from your unconscious, letting you know something is up. So it's really crucial at that point. With gut feelings are almost like your higher self is just screaming at you at this point. But generally it comes through as intuition, instinct, that little voice inside your head that sometimes tells you, wait a second before you take off from, under this green light, or any kind of warning signs, anything that it gives you from time to time, particularly when you need it the most. I would like to talk a little more about the conscious mind and the 10%. The 10% is really a rough estimate. I mean, there are many views and opinions on this out there. Some claim that it's anywhere between 10 and 20%. Others claim it's anywhere between 1 and 10%. From what I have accessed and what has been presented to me through the years, in terms of our human consciousness and in terms of how much or how little we're able to perceive, what I have come to understand is that we're actually not even quite at 10%. So let's say that on a good day, we're running on 10% brain capacity. Now, when we look at the human brain, and one way where it really shows how the other side of us, that 90% of our unconscious, is very much alive and functioning, we can look at the human brain. The human brain has activity throughout it. The electrical currents, the energetic currents that run between the neurotransmitters, creating these synapses. First, I'd like to point out that in order for there to be transmission, in order for these neurotransmitters to actually be transmitting, they need to be receiving. So this is, again, loops back to that other part of us that's connected and part of the other side, part of source. Now, looking at that kind of ratio, we've got a 10 to 90 ratio. The 90% runs the show. So much so that recently, and perhaps within the last year or two, tops, a group of molecular biologists, and it included, I believe his name is Dr. Bruce Lipton, who was a former professor at Stanford. Now, these scientists discovered and concluded that the conscious mind processes 40 bits of information per second, while the unconscious mind processes a whopping 40 million bits per second. So, well, for starters, this is because the unconscious, the higher self, is vibrating, being energy, is vibrating at a significantly faster frequency. And therefore it's able to encompass, perceive, and experience exponentially more than we do in the physical form, in our third dimensional realm, in our limited 10% consciousness. So clearly the unconscious is much vaster and processes exponentially the amount of information that our cognitive brain can process. To be exact, 1,000,000 times more per second, which is unfathomable for us. Per second. So in a minute, in an hour, in a day, it's all encompassing what it processes. And therein lie the answers. That's why therein lie all the answers. So by opening up your natural receptivity to what is outside of the realm of what you currently know, through your own volition, you will begin to receive everything needed to help guide you along your path. You know, phases of turmoil that we experience in life are a direct result of not being in tune or receptive to or in touch with our inner knowing and our higher self. And what becomes even more tumultuous is when you do receive messages, you do receive some sort of knowing, some sort of inner guidance, and we don't trust in it, and we don't trust in what we're receiving. One of the first things we assume is that we're fabricating these ideas in our head. And in a sense you are. They're coming out of the ethers because they're coming out of the ethers. And but it doesn't make it any less valid, any less significant. In fact, it's these things that we don't trust in. It's this connectedness to the unknown that we don't trust. And part of the reason, or the big reason for that, is through lack of understanding, because, you know, what we don't understand, we fear. So the quickest way of getting us to release fear, bring us clarity, and serve up some answers is to start listening to that higher self and to start trusting in those inklings, those slight hints that come through at this point. And believe me, once you start really listening to it and heeding what you're receiving, trusting in your own abilities, again, as the most intelligent species on the planet, we are capable of so much more. So it's really key for us to remerge with that unconscious, with that higher self. So your higher self beckons you at every moment. It tries to connect with you, it communicates with you. I mean, again, this is a super consciousness that is processing 40 million bits of information per second. It holds the answers. So by reintegrating with it, remerging with it, it will afford you that awakening, the proverbial awakening that will really allow you to become the fully integrated, interdimensional being that you really are. So you could say also our unconscious resides in another dimension. And as a result of being a part of us, the greater part of us, and the other part of us that is experiencing our limited perception, renders us a multidimensional being. Because although, yes, we are fragmented, but those parts of us reside in different realms. In two different realms that are pulling to reintegrate, that are magnetized to ultimately reconnect. That actual desire, that propulsion to understand more is generated by your unconscious. You know, they, back in the 1970s, they performed some studies where they found that the brain precipitates action by a little over 1/3 of a second. So in other words, it gets ready to act before it's actually received the signal to act. Again, further proving and indicating that the brain is a transmitter and a receiver. Now, one thing that is our biggest obstruction to accessing that higher self and receiving information from it is doubt. Doubt has been cleverly and effectively set in place by the ego. The ego, primarily because the ego does not like to be wrong. So under the guise of protecting you from making a fool of yourself by believing something erroneously, it actually hinders you from fully accessing and fully integrating and becoming your full potential. So doubt is a fear-based response that completely hinders us from being able to accept these subtle hints and messages from the unconscious, from the higher self. So it is of paramount importance to begin trusting that inner knowing, that slight feeling or, like I said, inkling that you receive from your inner world. And at this point, because again, we're so far removed, and it's almost like a muscle that hasn't been in use for eons and has withered and become useless and basically atrophied. Our connectedness, our ability to exercise that energetic muscle, if you will, that allows us to connect with and receive free-flowing information from the other side, has really become extremely weak. So in a manner of speaking, the only way to rebuild that up is to exercise it. And by that I mean practice. Practice listening to your intuition. And remind yourself that the ego, under the guise of protecting you, is what's really blocking you from fully integrating. And the reason why the ego does that is because once you become a fully integrated consciousness, in other words, once your higher self or your unconscious mind has managed to remerge with the small percentage of you that is your conscious mind or resides in your conscious mind, the ego is annihilated. Because, for starters, the higher self, the unconscious, dominates. It encompasses 90% of who you are. And because that higher self, that unconscious, is part of source, of energy, of God, and runs and functions on, among other things, unconditional love, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. It dissolves the ego. There's no longer a need for ego. Because again, ego is fear-based. And fear being an illusion of our third-dimensional physical world. So the vast storehouses of information that the higher self has privileged access to is something we can start becoming aware of through our connectedness or reemergence with it. That's why it's so key to really become that higher self again, because it not only has full backstage, behind the scenes, uncensored access to the big picture, where you can tap into, receive, and question anything you would like to know. Well, let me rephrase that. There are exceptions. There are exceptions in that we still need to be able to experience certain things that we don't see coming for ourselves for several reasons. One of which is the need for us to exercise our free will. We have free will, and choices that we make along the way obviously alter the course of our lives, or bring in new experiences for us. So at this point, although our communication again and our receptivity to this greater part of ourselves only really comes through almost like a thread. It's almost like a thin, almost flimsy, really, thread that kind of pierces through the veil and tries to reach us. The best way I can describe it is each time something like this happens to you through intuition, through a feeling, through a message that you receive, through that inner knowing, that inner voice, hook onto that thread, because the key is to kind of grasp it, so to speak, and hook onto it and follow it through. So this flimsy little thread, which is all we're working with right now, is what you have in front of you and within you, really, to kind of just hook onto and follow through. And how you do that is, especially at the beginning stages, when you, let's say there's some level of uncertainty or something you'd like to know about, or you have an uneasiness about, and you've kind of been having a feeling, your unconscious mind is sending you these messages and trying to get your attention. The key is to listen to it, hook onto it, and ask it to give you a little more info, to give you some more information, some more clarity, some more insight. And it will come, and it will come in a way that you can identify it, that you can process it, because ultimately the conscious mind is only going to accept and process as much as it's ready to. That's where your own volition and your own free will also has to kick in tandem with a readiness to become more, to understand more. And ultimately what this leads to is a meaningful life, because we're incomplete. We're incomplete because so much of our unconscious mind is on the other side. And the unconscious mind is also incomplete because although the 10% is a small fragment of it, it is also disconnected from it. So both sides mutually benefit from becoming one and becoming whole again, because at this point it's fragmented. So by beginning to accept communication and communicating with in return, because you can ask your higher self questions, you can ask it for clarification, you will begin to receive those answers. Now, a quicker way of getting there is through channeling and through tapping into, like I discussed in my previous video, I will mention it again, I offer private guided sessions for those of you who are interested in accessing your higher self and the other side quickly. And it happens on the very first session. If you'd like to schedule an appointment with me, contact me at oneopenvortex@gmail.com. The sessions are conducted via Skype, unless you are in the Miami, South Florida area, in which case we can do one live and in person. So just contact me. I'd be happy to give you information. I'll send you the prep sheet as to what you can expect and how to get ready for that. And I'm just really glad to be doing this, and I'm super excited about sharing my experience and my insight into this with you. And I know that it has helped many people to date over the course of the last 20 years to really connect and to really be very successful at really breaking outside of those restricted boundaries of our current 10% perception. And it really makes it a much more enjoyable and productive ride. So thanks again for watching. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Until next time, you know how it goes. Peace, freedom, and keep evolving. Take care. I'll see you soon.